In today's world, if someone makes a comparison between one culture and another, they are far too easily met with accusations of racism. But culture and race aren't the same thing, so I think it's worth asking if it's moral or licit to compare two cultures. And in order to answer that, I think we have to define what we mean by culture, which sadly isn't something that most people seem to be able to do, because we are several generations deep into an experiment in which we've jettisoned our own culture in favor of value relativism and secular pop culture, which isn't authentic culture. So let's try to start with a definition. I would say that culture is the incarnation of beliefs and ideas which are expressed as a way of life for a people. Now, that's not a definition I got out of a dictionary, but it's the best hybrid I can come up with based on everything that I've read and researched about culture. And if you disagree with that definition, I'd invite you to think of instances that you could point at and say, yes, that's culture. And ask yourself if your definition gets right to the root of what that thing is, or if my definition happens to be sitting underneath your definition. So to consider this definition, let's look at some examples to see if it fits. So let's start with one that I'm fairly familiar with, which is Christian culture, which starts with a set of religious doctrines, beliefs, ideas, which inform the way that people live, which they then develop rituals and celebrations to reinforce those ideas, all of which accumulates into a way of life known as Christian culture. The same thing happens with Islam, it happens with Buddhism, it even happens with modern ideas like communism. A set of Marxist, atheist ideas provide the foundational principles for how its adherents are to live their lives. And these beliefs are reflected in their rituals, whether they be Sunday worship or military parades, in their songs, whether they be devotional hymns or nationalist anthems, in their stories, whether they be the lives of the saints or scriptures, or heroic tales of class struggle. All of these things are expressions of culture which are grounded in foundational beliefs. And if you take nothing else away from this video, I want it to be this. Culture cannot survive without those ideas, and those ideas cannot survive without the reinforcement of culture. That's what culture does. It unifies people in ideas and then reinforces them for them. But if those ideas are lost, then the culture won't survive, except in a very superficial and residual way, which is the kind of thing that most of us experience when we go to those multicultural festivals. All you really get are expressions of food and dance and clothing, which doesn't really give you an intimate understanding of what that culture was about. And that's what multiculturalism accomplishes. In truth, we're not really living in multiculture where we're embracing all kinds of belief systems and ways of life. We're actually living in relativistic secular culture, which tolerates other cultures, but at the same time undermines the fundamental beliefs that makes each one unique. And anybody who's paying attention can actually see this happen. When you see first generations come to a place like North America, which is a bit of a melting pot, they really try to hold on to the authentic expressions of their culture and the beliefs that inform all of that. But successive generations start to fall prey to the secular pop culture, which undermines those fundamental beliefs, and which eventually makes the cultural expressions of those beliefs kind of meaningless and arbitrary. And once it reaches that state of decline, it's not worth doing anymore. It's not worth getting up early on Sunday mornings to go to church if you don't believe the doctrines of Christianity anymore. Culture cannot survive the loss of the ideas that informs it. So let me ask you now a derivative question from where we've come from. Is it wrong to compare ideas? And I hope your answer to that question is no, because some ideas, or even most ideas, are wrong, and the ideas that are right are superior to the ones that are wrong. And a culture that reinforces the correct ideas through education, through stories and ritual, is a superior culture to one that reinforces ideas that are wrong. Therefore, it's not wrong to compare cultures, and it's not racist to compare cultures, again, because culture is not the same thing as race. Let me leave you with one more example in case you doubt the permissibility of this idea of comparing cultures. I think we can all agree that Nazi Germany is worthy of criticism and a lot more. Most people take it for granted that Nazism was evil, and there's even quite a bit of concern now that some of those ideas are starting to reemerge. But when I often talk to people about Nazism, when it comes up in conversation, especially in YouTube conversations, I'm often left with the impression that people don't understand what it was or what made it evil. People often seem to think that it was just motivated by mere irrational hatred, which it wasn't. Nazism clearly had hatred as an ingredient, but that hatred was informed by beliefs. The Nazis had doctrines that they first accepted, which then engendered their policies and their ethical actions. And I rarely meet somebody who is actually informed about what those doctrines were. So I would strongly encourage you to look up some artifacts that explain what those beliefs were. The first would be Mein Kampf, which was Adolf Hitler's manifesto. And the second would be The Myth of the 20th Century, which was written by a high-ranking Nazi official named Alfred Rosenberg and is described as the seminal Nazi work. Now, I can understand if you aren't prepared or willing to take a deep dive into those two books. So if you want a neat and tidy summary of Nazi doctrines and beliefs, you can look up what's called the 25-point program of the Nazi Party. And seriously, take the 10 minutes to actually read through this. I think it will surprise a lot of you about the things that are written in there. And this is especially true if you want to push back against your perception of Nazism today. You have to recognize it in order to fight back against it. Now, they understood that those ideas weren't enough. They had to reinforce those ideas with the power of culture, which is why they developed a ministry of propaganda, which we often think of as just being a method for misinformation, but it was far more than that. One of the things that the ministry was responsible for were these elaborate pseudo-religious ritualistic rallies full of all kinds of pageantry meant to depict Nazi ideals. And this should start to sound familiar based on what we've been talking about so far. They were also responsible for developing a mythology of race, which was designed to supplant the Christian ideas which had already captured the hearts of most Germans. They were also responsible for art, music, movies, and theatrical productions, again meant to reinforce all of these Nazi doctrines. In other words, they were manufacturing culture in the service of their doctrines. And this was an evil culture precisely because it was undergirded by false doctrines. And if ever a culture was worthy of criticism, it's that one. We should be critical of cultures. We should compare cultures. And if anyone ever stands up and says we can't, it's probably because they're complicit in trying to reshape the cultural landscape according to their own doctrines and preferences without ever having to face criticisms of their own. The moment someone tells you that you can't think critically about something is the moment you should start to criticize and think critically if you haven't already begun to do so. Hey, thanks for watching that. If you enjoyed it, then be sure to like and subscribe for more. And if you want to support the making of content like this, then please consider joining my online community, The Reinforcements. It's kind of like Patreon, but instead of being beholden to a big tech company, it's a website I built entirely myself, so there's no risk of us being censored or shut down or anything like that. There are hundreds of people who have already signed up, and our mission is to renew and reinforce the church. So if that's you, then come check it out. As an added bonus for certain tiers, I will also send you a gift box from Glory and Shine, which is a Catholic, family-owned and operated company. They make bath and body products. They're actually their beard balm I'm sporting right now. I'm not just a spokesperson, I'm actually a customer. So even if you don't join the Reinforcements, maybe check them out anyways. Glory and Shine, they're an amazing company.